Per the agenda, this session 5 is the role of community-based organizations in the college access and success movement. I want to tell you a little bit about the presenter, and few words speak volumes here. It says in the program that Ann Coles is the Senior Fellow for College Access Programs. That's about as simple as you could put it. Ann spends her life working with families, with kids, with organizations across the country to make sure the money is there not only for these kids to access college, but to retain them in college so that the experience is one that terminates with success for life. As I think every organization here would wish, I think it's very important in ending today's conversation with another member of the National Collaboration for Youth. We give due focus on what happens when it works. Thanks. Ann?
Thank you, Ed, and thank you very much, College Options and NACRU. I don't quite know how to say your acronym, but in any case, I think this has been a really rich day in discussion. And I worked hard to prepare some remarks, and I realized it could all be summed up now in Amen. We can sing a hymn, and then Don will do the benediction. But I'm not going to, I will take a little bit of time. So, you know, what Ed didn't tell you, and I think it's relevant because it's really been hitting me hard today. I grew up on a college campus in a very academic family, but you know what? I never liked school. I just didn't like school. I didn't like college. I didn't like graduate school. I didn't like studying. And what I liked was going to camp. I went to Girl Scout camps throughout my youth, and I loved camp. I really liked traveling to new places. I was always going on these programs. I was looking for some new program. I'd save up my money one summer, work as a waitress, and go on a program the next summer. And then I always liked working. I could hardly wait till I got out of college so that I could go to work, and I was never going to graduate school because I just didn't like it, that studying business. And I think that the reason is, and I think that's true for many, many teens today, particularly teenagers and young teens, is that youth development principles and assets are largely not reflected in the way middle school and high school classrooms function. That's not true across the board. There are lots, you know, there's certainly many examples of innovation and classrooms that are, but in the classrooms that I have visited over the past 5 or 6 years in Boston, in these large district, public district high schools, it is pretty boring to sit there and have to listen and think about what you're going to do after school. So I think that that's why community organizations and youth-serving organizations have an incredibly important role to play in the college access and success movement in getting students ready for college, helping them get in, and helping them be successful. Because that's where the fun is for many, many students when they know where to find you. And with a little bit of coaxing, can get really engaged in the kinds of wonderful opportunities you offer. I think that there was a nice segue at the end about the need to mobilize community, across communities to engage students and prepare them for college, work, and life. And this is what I think one of the most important, one of the key reasons that youth serving organizations and community organizations have a really critical role to play as these movements get organized. And there are 3 that I wanted to cite in particular. One is Ready by 21, which Marita talked about and several others referenced, respond to the problem of youth reaching 21, the age 21, not ready for college, work, and life, and mobilizing state and community leaders to help students get ready. Second, is something called the Talent Dividend. And this refers, it's an initiative of CEOs for Cities, a national organization, and the Talent Dividend reflects a calculation that they have done of the monetary value to cities and the nation of increasing college attainment rates by 1%. And based on 2010 data, you raised the four-year college attainment rate of adults in the 51 largest metro areas in the country by 1%. We would produce an increase in income nationally of $143 billion a year. What the CEOs for Cities is now doing with the support of the Lumina Foundation, Kresge, and a couple of others, is they're offering a $1 million prize to the city that shows the greatest increase in the number of degrees granted per 1,000 residents over a four-year period. And there are 57 cities competing for this prize. And a third example of these community-wide mobilization efforts, and these have just really emerged. Ready by 21 was the first. These other two have emerged just in the last few years, is something that I'm sure some of you are familiar with called the Strive Network, which has the tagline, "Every Child Cradle to Career." And this is a network of cities and communities that have committed to working across sectors toward achieving quality benchmarks for building and sustaining cradle-to-career civic infrastructure. And these networks involve, citywide networks involve cross-sector engagement and accountability with people from education, philanthropy, the business community, the nonprofit community, and so forth, who together work to develop and implement a cradle-to-career vision and outcomes for students for which they collectively are holding themselves accountable for achieving. Currently, there are communities in 34 states participating in the Strive. It's a network of networks, really, and it's growing rapidly. And youth development and community organizations have a critical role to play in all of these initiatives because of the fact that schools are not, as we've seen from the data, doing a particularly good job even today in getting the vast majority of students from low-income families ready for college success. They are enrolling more students from low-income families in college, but these students are not succeeding once they get there. Are any of you involved in the Strive Network in your community? People raise your hand. You need to get involved because you have a lot to contribute, and it goes to the point that the question that was asked earlier is how, I think it was the Big Brothers Big Sisters, you asked about, how do we convince people that the work that we're doing with students out of school is really critical to the achievement and success of students in school. And I think a large part of that has to do with local youth development leaders convincing, being an active part of the leadership of these networks, inserting yourselves into these. Don't wait to be invited, and really being very vocal about the role that you and your youth development work play in students succeeding, staying in school, and being successful when they get there. You'll see why I said amen, because here's that Ready by 21 insulated pipeline you just saw, which I think is a really great visual. The center, the orange part, is the education system, and it goes from early childhood on the far left to work and career on the right. But students are only going to be, and I think this is actually something you can use in those discussions with with civic leaders to help them understand why your work is so important. Because students are only going to be successful moving through this pipeline if there is an insulation of support around the school experience. And what the pipeline does is it illustrates graphically the various ways that community organizations provide support to young students, young people from early childhood through post-secondary. And I think that underlying the pipeline is a lot of research, some of which we've heard today, indicating that integrated community-based support for youth reduces the risk or increases the likelihood of them being successful in school at all levels. So the next question I want to talk about is just briefly why community organizations need to assist with college access. First of all, it relates to school performance. The data we've just seen is that there's a lot of evidence of community organizations helping students get ready for college, both in that data and in other research done by Pat McDonough at UCLA and others documenting the limited college preparation and planning resources in high schools with large numbers of low-income students compared to the resources available in middle and upper schools in middle and upper income communities. And here I want to insert, for students to do well academically in school, they need to be in a good place socially. They need to have the strengths that you're working on addressing in youth development. They need to be confident. They need to have the self-regulation skills, those kinds of things. They need to be motivated. They need to want to do well in school if they're going to, especially given the fact that schools are not terribly interesting places to spend time. It takes a lot of discipline for these kids to do well in school, and they need to do that. Also, students whose families lack experience and knowledge to support college aspirations and whose schools lack the capacity to assist them, where do they turn to for advice, support, and help? Youth serving organizations are a tremendous resource for them in that regard if your staff has the knowledge and resources, such as My College Options, available and encourages students to use them. So the ways in which community-based organizations are well positioned to help students plan and prepare for college. And again, similar to what Mandy said this morning, by college, I mean any kind of education beyond high school that gives students a credential or the skills that will help them be successful in the workplace. And I think success in the workplace that also helps students be in a position to contribute in their communities and to provide well in all respects for their families, health, all the emotional, all those kinds of things. So first, many community organizations support the positive development of young people by embedding youth development principles into all aspects of your programming. And that's what we spent the whole day talking about. Also, the fact that many offer comprehensive services addressing the needs of the whole child, health and wellness, counseling, referrals for assistance, and in some cases, helping students find temporary housing and food, very basic kinds of things. And this help with non-academic needs, as we've seen, is an important contributor to helping them achieve in school. Community organizations typically have a lot more flexibility than schools to respond quickly to individual student needs because they don't function under the restrictive government policies of things like FERPA and don't necessarily require students to get written permission or jump through other hoops like that in order to participate in most activities. Finally, staff of community organizations are viewed by students and families as trusted sources of information and advice. They typically have a good understanding of students' social and cultural backgrounds, and so they're sensitive to the concerns of students and parents from different kinds of backgrounds. Next, what do we know from research the impact of community-based organizations on improving college access and success for students? Well, it's difficult, as several people said I forget if it was one or two panels ago, that it's hard to assess the direct impact of youth-serving organizations on students' college readiness and success. There are few programs have undertaken some studies looking at this, and some of you may be familiar with a summary, a synthesis of these studies published in 2009 by the American Youth Policy Forum, where they looked at the evaluation studies of 23 direct service programs. And looking at these studies, across these studies, they found a number of common trends that students participating in these programs had increased high school achievement, increased self-efficacy, they had higher educational aspirations and increased likelihood of going to college right after high school. And we know, again, from research that students who go to college directly from high school are much more likely to go full-time and to finish degrees or certificates by the age of 25. And finally, these students are more likely, who participate in these kinds of after-school activities, have higher rates of college enrollment. They're more likely to attend selective colleges and pursue a four-year degree, although I don't have a bias towards that per se, and are more likely to earn good grades in college and to accumulate academic credits, which is important in terms of students graduating within 3 years from a community college and 6 years, or preferably less, from a four-year college. And that has direct implications, of course, for the affordability of college. One of the reasons college is increasingly unaffordable, particularly for students from low-income families, is the amount of time that they're taking to get through college, because they're often not well prepared when they start. We've talked already about relationships, the programmatic features that we know from research that are important, and relationships, relevance, rigor, college knowledge development, youth-centered programs, so I won't go into those. I think I'll say just a little bit about the structural features of effective community-based college access programs. One has to do with leadership and autonomy, having competent and tenacious leaders with the independence to act quickly and strategically to meet students' needs, and that goes back to that flexibility issue. Two, using time strategically, providing students with experiences that expand their sense of possibilities, accelerate their learning, and keep them on track toward reaching their education and career goals. And a number of people have talked about the different pieces of that. Three is the importance of and the value of cross-sector collaboration, working with schools, colleges and universities, families, and other community organizations to address students' diverse needs and smooth the transition from high school to college and life as self-sufficient adults. And I'll give you an example of that, in Boston, there is an organization called Families United, F-U-E-L, Families United for Educational Leadership. And basically, these are sort of saving circles, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, parent saving or circles, and it's bringing together, FUEL brings together groups of parents to meet monthly to talk about and encourage them to start saving for college and to match their savings in small ways to the savings that they're able to put aside. And what's interesting about this is in a lot of college access programs, and I think this is true in youth-serving organizations, it's very hard, it's really challenging to engage parents in this work. So what's happening in Boston is a number of community organizations, instead of having FUEL has reached out to them and said, we focus just on parents and how they can help, empowering them to see how college can be affordable for their children and how they can play a part in that. And it's been great for the programs and great for FUEL and particularly for the parents. They have very good participation. There are monthly meetings of parents. They always provide dinner or supper because that's the best time of day for many parents to come, and it's not the incentive of, oh, here's free food, come. It's sort of the very practical reality of you need to have supper. We know that. We'll eat, just like we had lunch and heard a great set of panelists, the parents eat and talk about how they can save. And in some cases, they're only saving over 3 years, $500 or $600, but that's transportation for a commuting student for most of a year. So it's a very significant contribution that they're making to their children's education. Finally, as last structural feature that's really characteristic of effective programs are effective assessment and use of data. And again, we've heard earlier how that's really tough to do. And it's something that most youth-serving organizations, and it's not just youth-serving organizations, many, but I mean, support programs on college university campuses that I've worked with, I ask them, well, how do you know that your mentoring program works? Or how do you know that the Writing Center makes a difference? What kind of tracking do you have students? What do you know about their use? And they sort of look at me like, well, I really don't. I mean, I know this is a good program. I said, but we just haven't kept any data about it. And, I'm sort of thinking, I said to them, well, you're spending a lot of money on this program. Maybe it isn't making such a difference, and you should spend that money someplace else. What do you think? And I also see this in community-based organizations over and over again. And I think one way to approach this issue is to do more collective work around some of these. And this is where I'm going to, if I have time, Ed, just forget what I was planning to talk about, since you know that already, and talk a little bit about a couple of things that we're doing in Boston. One is that there's a network, an intermediary, I suspect exists in many cities, called Boston After School and Beyond. It's like a network of after-school programs. Beyond the Bell. So what we're doing is bringing there are a lot of college access programs in Boston, both community-based and campus-based. And they all work in their own little silos. Some do great jobs, some not so great, but they rarely talk to each other or get together. And I've often, talked to some of these people, because I come from the higher ed side. You're really after-school programs and your out-of-school time programs. You should get together with these other programs, and together we could be so much more powerful and have a real impact, because you have expertise on college access. They have expertise and resources on, well-being and health and fun and that kind of thing. And so we're finally doing that. Last week, and I think this is in reference to what someone asked, what can we do? We had a joint convening. I did it with Boston After School and Beyond, and brought together about the representatives of 50 different community-based programs that have college planning as a part of what they do, and campus-based programs. And instead of simply sharing information about what each of us did, we used a framework which is very similar to the frameworks that you've seen already today. Oh, it isn't in here, but there's one in front of you. This is what it looks like online. It's called the Achieve, Connect, Thrive framework. And it's very funny, or very interesting. I looked at this, Shared Vision for Youth, and the words are all the same. So it's clearly based on the same research that FYI put this a shared vision for youth. And what we had people talk together about which of the skills that within this framework, that they were really good at developing, and what skills might they focus on that aren't part of their current repertoire. And it was a very interesting discussion. What we're now hoping to do is to bring together offer the opportunity for a group of 8 to 10 of these organizations to use the same set of measures and to collectively assess their impact over a period of time in terms of developing these assets and skills in youth. And there was a pilot done of this just with community organizations last summer, and it was with a third-party evaluator, and it's very, very interesting for programs to see how they're doing against their own baseline and how they're doing in relation to one another. The methodologies that they're using to evaluate are focus groups, interviews, surveys, the usual kinds of things. Another thing that some of the programs are doing that's interesting is they're using an assessment tool that some of you are probably familiar with, developed by PAIR, which is the Program in Education, something in Resiliency, that Gil Noem developed. And what one organization did, this is an organization where students can assess across any of these frameworks, where their skills are in terms of skills that you need to achieve, the skills you need to connect, and skills you need to thrive. And then they do this at the beginning of the summer online. It's about a 10-minute assessment. And then they work with an adult in the program to decide, they see how they're doing, and they see, well, I'm strong in this, not so strong in that, blah, blah. And then they're deciding with the adult what I want to work on over the summer, which skills I want to build. And then we do an assessment at the end. They do an assessment which helps both them see how they did and helps the program see how it did in supporting students' development of these skills. So I think that the bottom line here is that this is just this using data, getting comfortable, compiling it, and looking at it and analyzing it for improving what we're doing, using the resources we have better, is a really critical piece to the success of our work in helping students achieve good outcomes, strong outcomes. Finally, I want to talk just briefly about the success piece that Ed referred to. What we're also, as part of a community-wide effort in Boston to double the number of Boston public school graduates finishing college, called Success Boston. It's an initiative of the mayor. It's very similar to Strive and some of these others. And it involves the public schools getting students ready, community-based organizations helping students get in, and colleges and universities helping students get through, employers helping students get connected. So after the first year, we had coaches from the community-based organizations like yours working with students that they worked with in high school through the first 2 years of college with funding from the Community Foundation in Boston. And these are adults who are trusted by students. They already know them. They know their neighborhoods. They have a history with them. And it worked very well. The community organizations thought, and the students liked it. The problem that we ran into were a couple. One is that these coaches were not necessarily as familiar as they needed to be with the academic policies, financial aid policies, and so forth at colleges. So they were somewhat limited in there were areas of the coaching that didn't work so well. And then they also didn't have access to students' academic records to sort of see how are they doing and who's falling off track and needs a little support. And thirdly, there were only 2 or 3 coaches and there were let's say at a community college, 300 students coming from the Boston Public Schools to that college that fall. So what we've now done, with funding from the Ford Foundation, is we have embedded these community-based coaches into the campus structures. So in one case, they're actually considered adjunct staff, and they are working in teams with campus-based college advisors and other support staff. They become one team, which allows the college to assign every student who's entering from the Boston Public Schools their own coach. And what happens on these teams is there's a lot of joint planning and information sharing. So the coaches, the community-based coaches, are now much stronger in terms of understanding and helping students with the academic and financial aid policy issues. And the campus coaches have much greater access to the resources of the community, the Boston community, when students are having non-academic problems that a university cannot help them with. So I think that that's just a really been very successful. We've seen, particularly at the community colleges and particularly for African American and Latino young men, big increases in their persistence from year to year, the students who are receiving that kind of personalized coaching. I think that coaching can help, this is where I want to end, deal with the issue that the person from Tulsa, Oklahoma, was it you, raised earlier, because I think that she asked a really tough and critical question, which we hear a lot in Boston, and that is, how to justify, as a student, how can I justify going to college full-time and not being able to work as much when my family has depended on me and continues to depend on me for financial support and help with babysitting, translating, all different kinds of things. The coaches have been really helpful, because particularly the community-based coaches, because they understand those issues and they can help students figure out how to manage some of these tensions, to stay in school but also continue to be a support to their families. So I can't underestimate how important I think the role of youth serving and community organizations are in this whole movement across the country to improve the college access and success of underserved students, both in terms of the opportunities that students will have in the future as adults, and in terms of the health and well-being of our communities and our nation. Thanks.
Thanks, Ann. Once again, time for a couple of questions before we wrap up. Elena. On the way. But I know you. We can all hear you.
I know. So this presentation just really speaks to what I'm doing. I manage a program that connects and supports community-based organizations. Okay, thank you. So I manage a program that connects community-based organizations with funding and supports them in forming relationships with community colleges, including in Boston, to support youth who are low income and have been disconnected from education and the workforce, going back in some cases through GED or back to high school diploma and then to college. And everything you said speaks so much to what I've seen, where the community-based organizations are positioned, what can they do. And the difficulty we're having with community colleges is a lot of the times they say, well, yes, we know you can do this and you do this really well, but for 50 students. So how 50 students, maybe 100. So the issue is the issue of scale, and how do you convince, especially some of those bigger systems that we work with, you know, City University of New York, California community colleges. So how do you convince them, and what kind of strategies can you suggest for a community-based organization, you know, given that they can't probably reach a scale that's truly meaningful within such a big system? So how do you convince them, and what kind of strategies do you think they should use in partnering?
Well, I think I think someone talked earlier about the need for models and for data that provide evidence of the effectiveness, and I think that's what we have is a way to convince. And I think you also are seeing this in some of these other cities that are members of, there's something called Communities Learning in Partnership. There are a number of these college access and success citywide partnership efforts. And there's a great one in Louisville, Kentucky, 55,000 Degrees, and using some of the data as a community organization from these organizations to demonstrate the value of partnering, but also the colleges taking on more responsibility, because you cannot, for the reasons that you say, do it by yourself. A community-based org can never do it, but you can teach the people at the college a lot about how it's involved. Now, is anyone here from Single Stop? And some of you are probably familiar with this. This is a national nonprofit, and I think they've been a great partner for us at and I think, again, in terms of advocating for this type of partnership at community colleges. It's an organization that helps students leverage all the resources, you know, from WIC and SNAP and just all kinds of, you know, deal with legal issues and things that would cost them money. They help them find places to get that help and resources. And we partner a lot with them, and I think that their presence on the community college campus is having an impact in terms of what you're saying, because they can see in very concrete terms, in addition to what our coaches are doing, the difference that and the value of partnering. And I think the other thing that I'm not getting at for you is the contribution and commitment they need to make to this partnership, so that the community college in UMass Boston, they are turning some of their advisors, their people from the TRIO programs, into coaches. And all these so they're taking a different approach than they've done historically. Instead of just sitting in the advising office waiting for students to come and see them, and they see lots of students, so I'm not criticizing, but is much more proactive with Boston Public School graduates than they have been historically with students across the board. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's.
Once again, I really want to thank Ann, and thank you for participating. And thanks. Now, please. As we close, this is not an artificial segue to the Metro. There's much more involved with what's going on today. You know, when I looked at the agenda and I saw that we were coming down to introduction of Don Muntz as the president of the National Research Center for College and University Admissions, to me that was all too convenient. It's a natural that the host is introduced either at the beginning of the day or the end of the day for any event that you attend. There's much more to this picture, and it was given away to me in naming his presentation One Dream at a Time. Because, you see, Don is not only a chief executive, not only a leader, he's a visionary. 6 years ago, this event came into existence because Don saw it as causal to partnerships, to amplified conversation, to a dialogue that would lead to better outcomes for our youth. 25 years ago, he assumed leadership of the National Research Center for College and University Admissions. Now, what we experience today is the fulfillment of Don's dream. Don's dream was the engagement of all of these adults proactively in securing opportunity for children to accede to their individual dreams of college and career success by finding those colleges that were interested in nurturing their interests and leading them on a path to a successful career. So his notion then was, we have to influence each child one dream, their dream, at a time. Isn't that what each of us does? But oh so simple to say. Now that 25 years later, National Research Center for College and University Admissions through the survey outreach, My College Options through the College and Career Initiative, online College and Career Initiative, Don's results dictate that he's influenced outcomes for millions of lives, all because of that dream. So to speak on the fulfillment of a dream and his absolute desire for more to come, I give you Don Muntz.